Hello and welcome to the making of Far Wind Stranded.
Thank you, Impa. Indeed, I am Geran and this is the making of Far Wind Stranded. I genuinely consider this my best series to date, and when you compare it to Vault-Tec just a few years before it, I think this struck the right balance between survival gameplay and story. Don't get me wrong, I do really like Vault-Tec, but even when it does return, it'll be greatly overhauled. As for Far Wind Stranded, if you happen to be watching this without knowing what it is, it's a hardcore Minecraft survival series using the Crash Landing modpack. When I wake up in my crash ship, the Far Wind, with no sign of my friend Joel, I have to survive long enough to try and find him and eventually get off the planet. This is made harder by it being a barren planet with nothing but endless dust and ruined cities. Oh, and the monsters. If you haven't seen the full series, and especially the finale, I highly recommend you watch it first. This video will contain a lot of spoilers, and I think you'd enjoy the series more if you watch it spoiler-free. Also, this video will, shall we say, spoil the magic, so only proceed if you want to know the reality behind the tricks. In this video I'll talk about the mod pack, Impa, technical issues I encountered, what editing techniques I used, and of course, the plot. First of all, the mod pack, the thing that supported the entire series. I didn't actually make many changes to the mod pack itself. I had to add some stuff at the very end and make some tweaks at the beginning, but for the majority of the series the mod pack was untouched. The changes I made at the start were a matter of necessity. Unlike every other series I'd done before, Far Wind had a proper pilot episode. That is to say that I made the first episode, then waited to see the response before making more. The response was good, so it became a full series. But I encountered issues. These aren't quite technical issues, so I'll talk about them now. I kept dying. See, the Crash Landing mod pack is one of these hardcore survival experiences. If you get the first hour or even the first half hour wrong, you cannot actually survive. If I'd recorded the first few episodes at once, I would have realised this before any videos had been made. As it was, the first 20 minutes or so were already uploaded as the pilot, and I had to continue that save. With the situation in which the pilot left me, I did not have time to make enough food and water to not die. The food was the bigger problem, especially as the hunger overhaul mod I think it was, reduced the only food I could make to half a food each. After 3 attempts to continue in which I died of hunger, I was forced to edit the mod pack to turn down or even disable these features. I didn't feel too bad, as to be honest, they're frankly terrible features. Same with Spice of Life. I completely disabled it, because however bored you may become of food, it will still stop you from dying. Then in episode 3, I ran out of water. That was when I did the dying in a dream thing. It wasn't originally planned to be a dream, there was just no way I could make the water. I was genuinely trying to stay alive, but I backed into a creeper and died. This, it being a hardcore world, deleted my save. I kept the footage and did very choppy, obvious cuts to make it seem a little bit surreal. It even replays the same footage a couple of times. I then loaded a backup of the world and spawned in some water because otherwise I could not have continued. I explained it away as Impa filtering water from the engine. After that I got on my feet and didn't need to cheat or tweak the pack at all. And I want to state this for the record, although I never got another glistering melon, I did not spawn the first one in. If I had, I would have spawned in a second when I needed a second. The last thing in this section is the texture pack. I used the Sortex Fanva pack that's noted as working with Crash Landing, and the only change I made was the Far Wind name. You know the big writing on the side of the ship? That's 2 1x2 paintings placed on there before the game began. Noticed how I did a slight cut when placing paintings? I didn't want the Fa or R Wind to appear while I was looking for one. Aside from painting the ship's name onto the wreck, I added nothing off camera. Except the deservation, that's the writing on the walls of the crypt. But the cities, the graveyards and the crypt itself were almost exactly as generated. I did have to make a little space in the crypt for all the signs, but the wider rooms were a convenient part of the generation. Next up is Impa, my faithful companion. It's an acronym that stands for Intelligent Multi-Purpose Assistant, which was made up by the maker of the pack. If you recall the first episode, I found the name in the quest book, and it seemed a good enough name for my ship's AI. I don't recall exactly when I had the idea for Impa being something I talk to, but as she did the intro for the very first episode, I know it was early in my plans. She's voiced by a text-to-speech program I found that, sorry, I'm going to keep to myself, and it was perfect. I could have used a real person to voice her, but that would have added immense complications like finding a suitable voice, then making it sound slightly artificial, along with the issues of not knowing how much she would or wouldn't speak in any given episode. And working with other people is great, but a completely solo series allows much more flexibility on recording, timings, and frankly, doing it very short notice sometimes. When recording and speaking to Impa, I would say my side of the conversation, then usually stand there in silence so I could add her voice in later. To begin with, I did vocalise her side of the conversation, but it was slowing me down. I was uncertain about what exactly I wanted her to say, and any hesitation would throw off my timings. Eventually, after I got some idea of her speed and style of speech, I would imagine her saying things, and this worked wonders for keeping things flowing. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct.
There you go. The only real downside with this plan is it would sometimes be a week or more between recording and editing. Then I had the issue of not remembering what I imagined her saying. Numerous times I had to work out what she said by hearing my response to it and reverse engineering. I hope all that made sense. The last little detail is that there were actually 3 different ways I could hear Impa. 4 if you include the MPA system, but that was a variant on one of the other ways. Inside the ship, her voice had a slight reverberation. Using the Impa device, it sounded like it was over a radio, and when using the sync chambers, it was her unedited voice. Oh, and it was muffled a couple of times from inside the ship. You can do a lot with audio editing. I like to think that a YouTube series like this isn't an everyday thing, and it required a lot of planning and work. The original concept for a crash landing series was as a sequel to Age of Decay. Rather than crashing alone, I would have been joined by Moo, James, and, of course, Joel. I first proposed this back in November 2016, when we were discussing possible mod packs for the next Age of Decay series. It didn't get very far as both Moo and Joel were uninterested in playing such a difficult pack. Moo, however, did suggest I play it alone and maybe do a survivor's log type thing. The reason that version of the series didn't happen is I'd already put the concept aside for a Subnautica series, what eventually became Riley of the Aurora. As Farwind went on, it borrowed more and more from what I originally planned for Subnautica, but as that idea developed independently, Farwind grew its own identity. Even after dismissing the Survivor's Log, the Farwind you got wasn't the one I first had in mind. I knew I wanted it to be a solo series, but I also knew that Joel and I have good interactions, chemistry almost as partners. Don't read into that. I wanted the story to be of us as shipmates who crashed on this planet. How could I do that and still have it as a solo series, you asked? I planned for Joel to be dead. My original version of the story had me waking up to find Joel's head on the seat next to me. He'd got decapitated horribly in the crash, and it wouldn't have been clear if I knew he was dead or not. I would have talked to him, left him to guard the ship, and it would have been my goal to get off the planet with Joel. Obviously, this is a lot darker than the story I went with, which, to be honest, is more of a story of hope. As it turned out, and really this should be in the technical problems section, but still, there's a massive bug with 1.6.4 mod packs in that they don't always connect to the Minecraft server and read player skins. I would have used commands or mods to give me a player head that wore Joel's skin, but I flatly couldn't. It just wouldn't load it. More on that in the technical problems section, but that is the only reason I didn't go with the darker story. When I decided on the Joel missing story, it was set in stone that he was never on the planet. Like with how I did Age of Decay, I also didn't set a specific timeline for the series. I didn't decide 95 episodes or 100 episodes or anything like that. I mean, I had no idea how many episodes would come out of each recording. I knew the ending, I knew how I'd get to the ending, and I'd keep going with the series until a suitable stopping point appeared. By the end, I'd done most of the quests, thoroughly explored the nearest city, and proven that I can handle myself. The biggest problem in recording was that it was hardcore. I tried to turn off the hardcore, but I couldn't. This meant that if I died, like I did in episode 3, the series would be over. To counter this and to minimise loss of progress in the event of my death, I wound up quitting out of the game and backing it up every single in-game day. A really convenient time to do this was overnight, a time when I was holding still looking at something where I could log in and out without it showing. When you log into Crash Landing, you see, it has little pop-ups informing you about HQM mode, mod updates, whatever. I had to hold perfectly still and wait until they vanished on their own before continuing. If I died, which in fairness I only did about 5 times in the entire series, not including the starving at the beginning, I could load the latest day's backup, wake up, and proceed as if nothing happened. I did consider doing more of the death dreams, but a friend who's also a fan of the series advised me I probably couldn't get away with it more than once. Once I had the sync chambers, meaning a single death didn't end the series, I could switch to doing ordinary recordings varying between 1 and 2 hours. It's difficult being in character all the time, especially when emotional things happened, so that was about the longest I could do at once. I can't find somewhere else to fit this in, so I'll put it here. I built 2 sets specifically for this series. The first is kind of obvious, the ship Joel's on in our chat. At the time we needed to record that, my Minecraft server was acting as a private multiplayer survival server for my friends, hosting the A Bit More of Everything pack. I built and filled the ship with sci-fi looking blocks and machines from that pack, which offered a much wider range than if I'd done it on Crash Landing. This had the added bonus of not just recycling the things previously seen in the series, and showing more of what the universe's technology can be. Of course I didn't have access to those things, I was trapped on a dust planet jury-rigging my equipment. It's even a different texture pack, although I think it might be vanilla. It's hard to find comprehensive textures for these giant kitchen sink packs. The other set appeared only briefly and slightly transparent. During my call with Joel, I flashed back to boarding the Far Wind and leaving him behind. To get this shot, I spent about 2 hours building a hangar for our ship aboard the Elysium space station. Sadly, I had to cut a lot of the flashback, but it was a complete set. It even had crates waiting to be loaded and a means of loading them. There are a couple of little Easter eggs in that mini flashback, so go take a closer look in the finale for yourself. One other thing I'll specifically discuss is the explosions at the end of the series. I mentioned that I added a couple of mods for the ending, and that was wireless redstone and its prerequisites. I uploaded the save to my server, and when I said certain pre-arranged phrases, a friend pulled levers to activate carefully hidden TNT. Perhaps I could have used timers, but trust me, this was infinitely easier. Once recording was finished, I adjusted the remains of the ship so it looked right, then had 2 volunteers posing for the stills at the end. And yes, the Joel in the pictures is actually Joel. This series was rife with technical issues, bugs, and things just not working. A couple of times the editing of episodes was stopped for days at a time when input text-to-speech just didn't work. No idea why I had a break, but I'd leave it for a few days and it'd work again. I mentioned earlier the 1.6.4 modpacks don't always connect to the Minecraft skin server. That was an issue several times. It didn't work when I tried to spawn in a Joel head for my original plot. About 20 episodes into the series my player skin stopped loading and I had to alter the texture pack's default Steve skin to mine. And then it still didn't work when I got my volunteers on to take the pictures. The way I got around that one is I made an identical texture pack with Joel's skin as the default player instead. With my models standing still, I switched textures and retook the picture. Then all I had to do was cut around a person and paste it in their place on the other. I don't know if that was the easiest way, but I'm happy with the results. By far, the biggest technical problem I encountered is the one that many viewers guessed: the disappearing clones. I don't know why this happened. The first time it happened I tried to reload the previous day's save, but it was always gone on the save. To get it back I'd have to go 1 day further and re-record 2 in-game days worth of footage. I think I decided to do that a couple of times, but as the glitch kept happening it clearly wasn't going to work. If it happened after something I couldn't or wouldn't re-record, I'd be stuck with it. The reason I think it happened was when the world saved or closed, the chunk with my clones sometimes unloaded. This just flatly deleted my clone. And because it happened when I saved the game instead of when I loaded it, no number of reloads would fix it. That's why I started putting spot and chunk loaders next to them. The bloody wiki said that would fix it. Clearly it didn't. Knowing the glitch would reoccur, I realised that it fit kinda well into the plot I'd written. I will talk more about the plot in a bit, but this was why I had the conversation with Impa about the manual disconnection. But yeah, more on that later. My biggest fear in this series was that my original body would unload. As far as I know, the sync mod doesn't differentiate between clones and the original. Whichever one you're in, that's the one that matters. That's why I never saved the game away from the ship. It was only ever the city clone, therefore, that bugged. Sort of the flip side of the previous section, this is about tricks I used in the editing. Things like the brain damage from the sync chambers too much, but also, did you notice that if I was looking at a creeper when it blew up, my vision blurred slightly? I was going for a sort of flashbang-esque thing. It was a very small detail and it didn't happen often, but it was there. So, the sync chambers. The reason for my sink sickness, or whatever you want to call it, was necessary for the plot. That was the original reason I added it. But it turned out that it made my character seem more vulnerable. I'd say it's hard to make someone actually worry about a character in Minecraft, given how death has little meaning, but even more so in a story. There's wanting someone to succeed in hardcore, and there's worried for someone's safety. After a particularly bad bout of sink sickness, a viewer commented saying they were genuinely worried for my safety in real life, that the stress and uncertainty my character was feeling seemed so real it had to be. Funnily enough, I'd say that's tied for my proudest moment of the series, not the acting so much as how it made someone so concerned. The other proudest moment is similar. I think it was when I died for the first time in a clone body. Someone commented saying that I managed to make a Minecraft death traumatic, which is just amazing. It was mostly blurring of the visuals that I used for sink sickness, but I think I had ringing in the ears sometimes too. The more I'd use the chambers in a short space, the worse the effects would be. It's relatively easy to portray psychological effects in something first person. I know the Far Cry games love their portrayals of drug effects for the same reason. Because it's all done from the person's perspective, it's much easier to imagine feeling how they do and suffering the effects they are. Basically, you know what they know because you've seen it too. The memory loss from transferring into a new body seemed like a logical thing to me. I think it'd be like waking up from the most real dream ever. I personally have very vivid dreams, and most days something triggers a memory which I only then realise was, in fact, a dream. Of course, it sometimes goes the other way, where something I thought was a dream is real, but that just shows how malleable the human mind is. Probably my biggest editing achievement in this series was the video call with Joel. That took a lot of setup. I scripted the conversation, recorded it with Joel, doing multiple takes until I got a perfect version of each line, edited it all into a flowing conversation, then played it while directing Joel's movements on the ship set I'd built. That was all needed so he'd look around at fitting times, showing what little emotion can be shown in Minecraft, and making the most of it not being a static image. Once I had the footage of Joel that perfectly matched the audio, all I had to do was get it on the screen. When recording the rest of the finale, I positioned my view in front of the monitor, faded out the heads-up display, and stood still. I knew exactly how long the video of Joel was. Once it had run its course, I faded in the HUD again, and could move freely once more. The advantage of that over just using a still image of the screen is the world around me kept moving. Animals made noises, the sun moved across the sky, and plants grew. The best way to make something seem like part of the world is to keep the world moving with it. When editing the episode itself, I overlaid the footage of Joel and used 3D mapping to shrink and tilt it. Took quite some time to fit it perfectly onto the screen, making sure the angle was spot on, but with a little fade in and out of the overlay, I think it really looks like it was on the monitor. And we've come to the big one. Before I talk about this, I want to state two things. First, I've previously confirmed that Farwind and Age of Decay take place in the same continuity. I refer to them collectively as the Far Ages series. Second, if I don't explain a plot point in this video, it's very unlikely that I intend to. I'm of the mind that there should always be an answer to every mystery in fiction, but that doesn't mean it should always be revealed. An example. The glowing briefcase in Pulp Fiction is one of the most talked about mysteries in pop culture. There are some very convincing theories that I won't go into for spoiler reasons, but what I will say is that conclusively, none of them are true. The director has stated beyond a shadow of a doubt that he did not decide the contents. If there is no answer to the mystery cannot be solved. It has no solution. So why the hell bother thinking about it? So, the plot. I'd decided the twist of Joel not being aboard when it crashed before I'd even recorded the first episode. I knew he wasn't there, I knew why he wasn't there, and I knew that he'd be the one to find me. I'd also planned for the entity we know as G6. The most common question I've had after the finale is, was G6 a deleted clone? No. As some people have rightly pointed out, they're shells. They're a Geran Reaver suit for me to slip into to keep the actual me safe from harm. They have no minds, they have no souls, and no one else can use them. So how was one of them working against me? There wasn't one. I understand why so many people jumped to this conclusion, especially during the premiered finale. This has been a very long series comprised of 95 episodes spanning almost exactly 2 years. Even if you binge-watched them in the run-up to the final episode, I wouldn't expect you to remember all the clues. I don't want to spoon feed the answers, partly because that's no fun, but I will say episodes 32, 39 and 51. That way you can go have a look at the important bits without having to rewatch the lot. I teased in the last section that the sync sickness was needed for the plot. If you rewatch the episodes I mentioned, linked in the description for your convenience, it should be apparent what happened, but perhaps not how or when. That's where episode 50 comes in, again linked in the description. I feel I included enough little hints to the answers so that it could be solved, but not so many that it was obvious they were clues. When you add in the deservation from episodes 91 and 92, which I did write for the series, plus the finale, I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions. As far as I can tell, unless I've forgotten something, that's all the plot information I'm willing to reveal. There was a reason the Farwind crashed in the first place, but as Impa was offline and Geran was the only one aboard, and has amnesia, it's your best guess what that reason is. I'm looking forward to adding more series to the Far Ages continuity, and the day it's apparent in what order the series come. This video's gone on long enough, so I will leave it there. If you sat through it all, you are a mega fan of Farwind Stranded, and I want to thank you dearly for supporting this video, this series, and me. Farwind is a series of which I am very proud, and I think it is some of the best writing, acting, and editing that I have ever done. I look forward to topping it. If you have any questions about the series that you feel I didn't answer in this Goliath of a video, please comment them below. But be warned, if they're plot related, I probably won't answer them. Thank you again, I hope you enjoyed this and the series, and check out the Farwind merch on my merch store. There's a Jeffrey design for clothes, and a couple of characters available as stickers, phone cases, etc. And I will catch you later.